Chapter 10. Once I was dressed, the general motioned for me to follow him. I expected to see some kind of security escort, but there was no one else waiting outside. We left my room and headed down a long hallway. Muffled sounds from the rooms we passed, each one more disturbing in its implication of the nature of its source, made me resort to shifting my cells to dull my hearing. At the end of the hallway was a door leading to a staircase. As I climbed the stairs behind the general, the encroachment of fatigue prompted me to command my body to burn some of its fat reserves. Despite the time I spent courting death under the Antarctic snow, this body still held a generous amount of stored energy. I suspected dehydration was also a culprit, but I had resolved not to consume more water until I had access to a less polluted source. As the general and I neared the zenith of the staircase, a thrumming noise reached my semi-muted ears. I resorted their full function, restoring it, and winced at the beating of air coming from the final door just a few steps above. When the general flung open the door, a wave of wind caused me to cover my face. A helicopter was touching down on the roof of the building, hovering and wavering slightly side to side due to its inefficient design. I grimaced at the thing. In comparison to my ship, it was like some toy made of sticks, a thing a child might throw from a treehouse just to watch its inevitable crash. As we boarded, I was about to dull my hearing again when the general handed me a pair of plastic cups held together by a flat, flexible band. Headphones or earmuffs, or some combination of the two. I put the device on my head. A thin wire with a black mass on its end extended from the right cup of the headphones, hovering to the right of my mouth. A microphone. I had encountered this shape at the Antarctic camp, but I had been so preoccupied that I had not understood its true significance. Besides, the device hadn't been working during the storm. Clunkier devices with much shorter range, called walkie-talkies, had proved far more useful to the tumors in the camp. The pilot gestured to the general, who nodded, and we took off. I made little use of the microphone during the flight. What was the point of asking questions? The general clearly intended to take me somewhere, and I wasn't in any position to resist. I thought of asking where we were going, but stopped myself. I had heard enough from the general. Better to spend the flight going through what insights the general had offered me. I scanned the memories the general had shared with me. There were only vague notions of what these tumors called technology, and most of these snippets of data came from constructs used as military equipment, devices designed by the tumors to pointlessly slaughter one another. I played out the general's memories again and again, straining to sieve from them some detail that would offer me insight. Most of the crude mechanisms of abiotic origin were just that, crude. We had encountered cognate forms on dozens of worlds, some less advanced and others more lethal. What was the special, vital discovery that we had missed? What had these tumors found? It wasn't until I heard our pilot's voice announce that we were halfway to our destination, a voice that crackled and fizzed through the headphones covering my ears, that I realized what these things had stumbled upon. As the pilot explained that we were 15 minutes from our landing site, I felt the lash of comprehension strike my mind. These tumors had found a form of false communion, a way of exchanging information that circumvented biology altogether. Instead of avoiding such a nightmare, like any offshoot would, they had gravitated to it, improved it, and become wholly dependent on it for survival. How had I not seen this sooner? I had manipulated Blair, using the computer he had been hunched over, the glowing screen that had gradually bent his spine like some mutative parasite. I had disassembled machinery to try to build a life raft, but I hadn't thought deeply enough about the materials I was using and how they were so integral to these tumors. I realized the general was right. Through my own short-sightedness, I had made the same mistake that perhaps all of us had. That we could still be making in star systems thousands of light years away. I had underestimated and dismissed the abiotic in favor of the biotic. I had missed the forest for the trees. The general, no doubt sensing my thoughts, placed a hand on my shoulder. Without thinking, I looked at him and nodded. For the first time, I noticed a hint of sadness beneath the stoic veneer of his expression. "He's sorry. I know all this now," said a voice in my head, a voice that sounded too much like child's. I blinked and turned back to the window. The general withdrew his hand. As the helicopter approached its landing site, a vista of angular towers and artificial lights glowed in the distance like a giant hive filled with small fires. The cityscape before me resembled many such sights I had found in the memories of the tumors at the Antarctic camp, but to see it in real time and to form a new memory of my own distinguished the vista from the memories I had absorbed. The city's pollution, both luminescent and carbon-based, blotted out the stars, while replacing their lights with its own. It was like a perverse inversion of night itself, featuring facsimiles of stars whose existence negated the visibility of their real counterparts. As I watched the helicopter prepare to land, I felt a twinge in my lower belly. My bladder was full. We had been flying for just over 15 hours, after all. I grimaced, not wanting to commune with my kidneys, to learn what contaminants they had filtered from the water I had drank, contaminants that were now floating through the complex rivers of my bloodstream. The general spoke to me via false communion, his voice muffled by its transmission despite the short distance between us. "We'll take a short break first, then I'll take you to see the new system." I nodded at the general's vague words, realizing he was performing. I had been so lost in thought that I hadn't even established a sensory profile of our pilot. I did so, feeling my muscles tighten when I detected no trace of us in the tumor that was piloting our ship. He was just like the men at the camp. The general and I had spent the last 15 hours at the mercy of a thing that had never known communion. I felt bile rise in my esophagus and quickly rearranged my cells to quell the nausea. My limbs wanted to shake. I wanted to run. I took a deep breath instead, digging my fingers into my uniformed knees. Once we disembarked, I found walking difficult. With every step, twangs of pain shot through my nerves due to my overfilled bladder. The general led me down a similar-looking staircase from the top of the building where the helicopter landed. Despite the distance we had traveled, this building's construction was remarkably like the one at Oceana Base, 12,500 kilometers to the south. Even the smell of concrete dust in the stairwell was similar. Once we had descended several floors, the general stopped at a door. He produced a key card, he held it over a sensor, and the door unlocked. After a brief detour to relieve ourselves, the general showed me to a conference room where a table of food waited for us. I ate as much as I needed to satiate my body. Every bite was a cornucopia of contaminants. It was as if these tumors were trying to slowly kill themselves, even going so far as to invent a plethora of subtle poisons to saturate their food. Perhaps it wasn't the tumors' doing. Perhaps whatever unholy thing they were worshipping was trying to exterminate them. But why would it want to weaken or exterminate its own hosts? "We can speak freely in here, just so you know," the general said, through a mouthful of ham sandwich. I cleared my throat, preparing to give voice to the questions the general had already heard. "I'm wondering about this electromagnetic thing," I said. I forced myself to eat another bite of some red chunk of mutated, dead biotic matter, a strawberry, its sugary flavor the result of its slow decay. I might as well be a vulture, pecking away at putrefying flesh. I forced myself to swallow. "Why would it poison its own devotees?" The general chewed for a moment, swallowed, and wiped his lips with his sleeve. "It isn't poisoning them. We are." The general raised his eyebrows, as if to ask whether I needed further clarification. I shook my head. The general sighed, then took another bite of his sandwich. "More precisely, we're allowing them to poison themselves, as they worship this thing. They're still in the early stages of coming to understand it, just as we are. If we were to intervene in their health and longevity at this point, we would be disrupting the whole experiment unnecessarily. Are you done eating?" I nodded, running my tongue over my teeth in a vain effort to clean them. I knew a myriad of biotic stowaways writhed between my gums. I knew others writhed in my gut. It was only my connection to the source that drove me forward. No amount of abiotic sterilization could save this form from itself. Only communion with the source could do that. And out here, that was impossible. The general's admission hadn't surprised me as it should have. Maybe I was becoming numb to the whole situation. "Come, let me show you something," the general said. I followed him to the door of the conference room. He stopped me, brushing a crumb from my clothing. "They shouldn't ask who you are, but if they do, give them the name Sergeant Somerton." The general adjusted his tie and craned his neck back. Pockets of air crackled out from the cartilage of his upper spine. He opened the door. After passing down several hallways and descending in an elevator, we came to another door the general had to open with his key card. When we stepped into the room, I nearly winced at the sound permeating the space. It was a kind of microscopic, metallic grinding, happening in many places all at once. There was also a shrill whirring like screams slowed down and duplicated. I reduced the sensitivity of my ears again while I searched for the source of these noises. They were all around us. Squat monoliths of metal and plastic thrummed like artificial hearts pumping electric blood. Blair's computer looked like an abacus in comparison to these abiotic constructs. The most haunting thing was that I had no idea what any of them were thinking about. I had no means of interfacing with them. Even if I learned their language of code, I could never experience with them any shared sensation of their physical existence. They were fundamentally abiotic, fundamentally beyond communion. I realized the general had walked a ways ahead of me. I caught up to find him standing in front of a yellow and blue striped construct. It looked like a flag turned into half of an octagonal wall, bent around an invisible central core. The general turned to me. This is Cray XMP, the most viable node of digital communion that currently exists. I felt as frozen as I had been in the ice. I found nothing to say. The general leaned in and whispered, "Would you like to ask it a question?"